Everybody hear me?
Oh. We're in the cold in the morning, no? Huh? We're in the cold? I woke up at like 10. But then I woke up and I was like, breakfast this morning. Oh, yeah. I think it's food.
Who's moderating this, but should we start?
It's Billy Idol. Let's see.
Yeah, we're going to be starting in a few minutes. Just give us time to get organized here. Thank you, Dennis.
I can't really hear you. It's a little low.
Okay, hold on.
Let's see, unless it's me. Let's see, function.
Dennis, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, I think it was me. My volume was low.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, we're trying to do it from the television and also the computer. So can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I will be spearheading the team meeting in a few minutes, Dennis. Just give us a few more minutes before we get some more people on the call. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
I just, yeah, kind of little. But
Oh, no, he did. At least I didn't get a message from him. I was trying to figure out.
They took a PC, I don't.
Oh, you're talking about. Yeah, we're.
All right.
You should get probably towards the end of the day, all of the cases.
Well, shall we? Should we get started?
Including.
All right, it's 12:03. Good afternoon, KW South Bay. How's everyone doing? I can't hear you. Come on, guys. How's everyone doing? Fantastic. You know, and it's only 4 of you, so it's super loud. All right, we're going to go a little different today. We're not going to go through all the laundry of stuff. We're going to jump right into the biggest topic that's going on right now is the eviction moratorium. So Dennis, I know you've been with us last year and wanted to bring you back to kind of give us an update of what's going on. We just heard that the eviction moratorium was extended. It was supposed to expire September 30th, and all of a sudden, you know, the state decided to extend it. So without further ado, we have Dennis P. Block. Awesome, Dennis. Oh, he's not even on the call. All right, so yeah, I think he stepped out for a bit. All right, let's transition real quick and let's just go through some of the stuff, and then we'll get Dennis back on the call. So I was looking at the wrong information here. All right, Nat, if we can just go ahead and go through the slides real quick until Dennis gets back. I just want to go ahead and spearhead Dennis, and then we'll go through some of the motions. So our mission and our belief systems. Who wants to share our mission and belief system? Who wants to volunteer? Rosie. All right.
Our mission is to provide aliens with a place where they will be empowered, trained, and motivated to experience.
Simon, you're muted.
See, technology, right? Thanks, Dennis. So what I was saying earlier, before you stepped out, Dennis, I wanted to just go ahead and spearhead. You know, a lot of us have a lot of questions regarding the eviction moratorium that's in full effect right now, and more so the extension that the state of California extended to, I believe, January 30th. So I know you've been here last year, and I wanted to bring you back to kind of give the agents just a good understanding of where we stand, what's going on from your perspective. So without further ado, Dennis P. Block.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate that. I hopefully everybody can hear me fine. I have an initial question. I see a lot of pizza on that desk over there, and I'm somewhat surprised that I don't have any on mine, but what can I do? Actually, my daughter, I don't know if you can see this, my daughter brought me sushi. So I'm actually having some sushi and no rice, by the way, just cucumber and the tuna. But in any event, yes, I did speak last year, and we have a new day and age. There is no extension of the moratorium. You were saying January 31st by the state. What I think you meant to say was by the county of Los Angeles. But I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to make this really simple because the politicians not only are trying to, what would be a good word? Oh, I know, screw every landlord in the state of California, where the losses are staggering up to $1 billion, and where, in my opinion, at least 85% of the tenants who are claiming an inability to pay because of COVID are out and out liars with purchasing new cars and going on vacation and working full time, or never lost their job to begin with, or on a pension. So the economic disaster that is totally politician driven has really decimated our industry. But there is some small light at the end of the horizon here, where landlords finally, as of October 1st, have been unshackled, where we can proceed forward with evictions. We were, of course, proceeding forward with evictions in any kind of a case where the tenant had violated a term of his rental agreement other than rent. We were also proceeding on rent cases where the tenant didn't return that financial declaration of hardship, which they had to do if we served a 15-day notice to pay rent or quit. The tenants had to sign a declaration. If they didn't, then we were going forward with lawsuits. So even last week, for example, we had over 30 lockouts with the sheriff's office on eviction cases that we handled. Of course, that's down from what we normally do, but it just shows you that the eviction cases are open, courts are open, and that we can proceed. So let's talk about what the Tenant Relief Act was about and how it's not officially over, but certainly we can proceed forward with any type of an eviction that we want at this point, with some caveats. So let's first talk about the 3 time periods that the state created in terms of the periods for which rent was owed. One was the protected time period. That was any rent owed from March 1st, 2020 through the end of August 2020. For that 66-month period, if a tenant owed you rent and has not paid you to today, you cannot do an eviction based on that time period. Once again, from March 2020 through August 2020, that now is considered a civil debt, and you can only sue for that in a civil court or in small claims court. You do have to wait until November 1st of the year 2021. That's coming up next month. And you can then sue for that rent owed for that 6-month period, which once again is called the protected time period. My firm will be assisting landlords in filing small claims court. We're not allowed to be in small claims court, but we're going to assist you by filing the paperwork for you, locating your tenant through skip tracing services if required, serving your tenant, and getting you prepared to go and do your court appearance if you want to avail yourself of that for this, quote, protected time period. The transition time period is all rent owed from, that would be September 2020 through the end of September 2021. So that's a 13-month period. Literally, the government has created 19 months where people, landlords and income property owners could not proceed forward and attempt to collect their rent. 19 months. Can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if you sold a house, escrow closed, you're entitled to your commission, and someone walks up to you by the name of the governor of the state of California and says, oh, you can't get your commission for 19 months. And then I'm going to talk to you about what's going to happen, whether you can even get it in the 20th month. Can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen? So, but this is what we're faced with the people who claim to be governmental officials of the people. Well, of some people, certainly not people who own income property or are landlords. So for the transition time period, technically, if you had served a 15-day notice on your tenant during this transition time period, and the tenant hasn't returned the declaration, you have the right to go forward with an eviction right at this moment, at this point in time. If they did sign the declaration, then you can go forward if they didn't pay 25% of the rent by September 30th. So for the transition time period, once again, September 2020 through the end of September 2021, those 13 months, the tenant had to return the declaration. If he did, then he would have to pay you 25% of that time period by September 30th. Otherwise, you can go forward with that case. There is one proviso, and that is that you had to apply under the Rent Relief Act, where the government will be paying 100% of the rent if the tenant qualified. So that's a website which you might want to write down called housingiskey.com. Housing, is key, KEY.com. Before I can file an eviction lawsuit now, you guys got to go to that website and apply. So it's the transition time period, every penny that's owed for that transition time period. You have 20 days after you apply, then I'll be able to file an eviction lawsuit based on a 15-day notice that you served in the transition time period. 20 days. Within that 20 days, the government either pays you in full or rejects the claim because the tenant, for example, didn't qualify or didn't do anything once he got the invitation to apply to the rent relief program. If the government pays you, obviously you got 100% of your money and you're happy. And there has been some persons who have been successful. Some money has been distributed. I know I'm one on a tenant that I had in West Hollywood where I got almost all my rent. So on that basis, you certainly need to apply. If the tenant does nothing and you don't get a rejection, all you do is you wait 20 days. Once that 20 days comes and goes, then you have the right to proceed forward with your eviction case. Now, any rent owed as of October, that's the post-moratorium period, and that's going to go from October 1st this month to March, the end of March of 2022. And that you only need to serve a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, but not one of the forms that you got on your form file, that 3-day notice. Forget that. Those forms, throw those out. There's a new 3-day notice form, which is on my website, which you can look over my right shoulder. And you can see the website, which is evict123.com. That's the approved new 3-day notice that you would use for the period of October this month and forward in time through the end of March. You would serve that 3-day notice. The tenant will have 3 days to pay the full amount of rent. There's no discount. Then you can proceed forward with an eviction by, of course, calling my office. But you first have to do something. And in order to go forward with the eviction, the court is requiring by the new law that you apply once again for housingiskey.com. And either you're going to be rejected or you're going to get your money in full. That would be fine. Or you're going to wait 20 days and you didn't get any result from anybody, which means that all you have to do is testify and file something under the penalty of perjury that your application was not responded to within 20 days. So if that happens again, you can go forward with your unlawful detainer. If you haven't served a 15-day notice in the transition time period, don't do that now. Right now, what I would do and what we're recommending is that you just serve, even though the tenant owes you a bunch of rent, serve a 3-day notice, the new one, that's on my website, for the month of October. You're going to need to apply. When you apply to housingiskey.com, apply for every penny that's owed for every single month, including October. So for that period of time, if you don't get your rent in full or a rejection, if you get a rejection or if you don't get a response within 20 days, then we can go forward. So we're starting tons of eviction cases right now. So if you have a tenant who owes a bunch of rent from previous months or just owes you the October rent, now is the time that you serve that 3-day notice and apply for housingiskey.com. My firm, of course, will assist in preparing and serving the applicable notices for non-payment of rent. We're taking in a ton of cases right now. And then at the, you'll have to apply yourself. I can't do that for you for the rent relief program. But quite frankly, the government is not giving out money that quickly. So we're going to be able to go forward finally, and evict your tenants. If your property is not subject to any rent control and your tenant is on a month-to-month tenancy, we can terminate that tenancy right now, this moment. So under statewide rent control, most properties are under rent control unless it's a single-family home, a condominium, a townhouse, or a property that was built within the last 15 years, or if the tenant's only been there less than 1 year. In all those situations, houses, condos, townhouses, property built within the last 15 years, or a tenant who's only been in possession for less than 1 year, you don't like that tenant, we can just merely serve a 60-day notice if they've been there longer than 1 year, or a 30-day notice to quit for if they've been there less than 1 year. No reason need be given. So if you're representing a client on a house and there's a tenant in possession, and obviously in order to market the house, you need the tenant in bye-bye land, then in that situation, you would just merely serve a 60-day notice because a house, a single-family home is not subject to rent control. You can ask the tenant to leave. You don't have to pay any relocation. You don't need a reason to evict. Now, if you're dealing with a duplex, for example, and the owner is not an occupant in that duplex, if you're selling that duplex and you want the tenants to vacate, you can't do it because you would need to have good cause. Your property would be subject to statewide rent control, and you would have to have good cause. And the fact that you want to sell the property is not good cause. If you're the purchaser and you want to move in, or you want a close family member like a grandchild, son, spouse, or grandparents to move in, certainly you can do that. You do have to pay relocation, which is 1 month's rent, but you can get the tenant to move. But you as the seller of the property can't use that excuse that, hey, I'm selling the property and the new owner wants to move in. That's not a proper reason under statewide rent control at this point in time. Again, if your property is not subject to rent control, move forward with either a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice, and you don't need cause. Now, that's only come about as of October 1st of this year, just a few days ago. Before, you were stuck that you had to have good cause, even if your property was subject to statewide rent control. But now, as of October 1st, you're free to move forward, serve your notices, and rid yourself of these people for whatever reason that you want to do so. In other words, that you have now been restored to being the Lord of the land, which is also synonymous with landlord, because now there's no impediment for you to evict a tenant that's not under rent control. Now, if you do have tenants that are under rent control and you would like to rid yourself of them, but you don't really, have a cause to do so, there's a catch-all clause that we can use in almost every case to evict any tenant in a statewide rent control. And that is, we can use the renovation reason. So if your property needs renovation and it's under statewide rent control, it's a multi-unit apartment house, and you have a tenant there who's been there a long time and you want the tenant to move. Maybe you want to raise the rent. Maybe you're selling the building and it's more attractive if he's gone. We can use a renovation reason, which is that we're going to renovate the unit. That requires that the renovation take at least 30 days to complete. And also that it requires that you obtain a building permit, like an electrical or plumbing permit. In that situation, either you're going to renovate the kitchen, you're going to renovate the bathroom, or both, and make sure that your contractor pulls a permit and make sure that your contractor is there at least 30 days doing the work, because we have the right at the beginning to serve your tenant, if he's been there longer than 1 year, a 60-day notice to vacate, even though it's under statewide rent control. So we basically have cause to evict any tenant that we want, even if it's under statewide rent control, by using the renovation. Don't forget, with renovation, we do have to pay relocation money, but the relocation money is only 1 month's rent. So since it's only 1 month's rent, it's pretty simple in terms of paying that either by way of a credit in the last month or actually giving them a check. And then we can proceed forward with an eviction if they don't get out at the end of that 30 or 60-day period. So that's basically what we're looking at now. We have the right to proceed forward with the eviction cases, serving a 3-day notice for the October's rent, applying for housingiskey.com, the rent relief program. Again, when you apply for every single month that the tenant owes you, even though we're only asking for October's rent. So we have the right to proceed for non-payment of rent. If your property is not subject to rent control, we don't need a reason now. We can immediately serve a 30 or a 60-day notice. And again, if your property is subject to statewide rent control, we can now move in, if we want to move in, our family members, by paying that 1 month's relocation or by doing the renovation eviction. Now, the last topic would be dealing with rent increases. If your property is subject to statewide rent control, you're entitled to raise your rent. You could have done it before. You didn't have to wait till October 1st, but you can certainly do it now. Right now, it's 5% plus the CPI. The CPI is 3.6%. So if you want to do a rent increase, feel free. The total is 8.6% for any property that is subject to statewide rent control. Remember, all properties, unless there's a local jurisdiction like Los Angeles or West Hollywood, all properties are subject to statewide rent control, unless it's a single-family home, a townhouse, condominium, newer building built within the last 15 years, or the tenant has been there less than 1 year. So there you don't, if it is subject to statewide rent control, you do have to you do have the right to serve a rent increase notice that's 8.6%. Now, if your property is not subject to any rent control, you can raise the rent to whatever you like. There is no limitation. So if you're raising it 10% or less, you serve a 30-day notice. If your rent increase is going to be more than 10%, then serve a 90-day notice. There is no 60-day notices of rent increase anymore. The legislature kind of took that one away. So serve your 90-day notice and you can increase the rent 20%, 30%, whatever you like. There is no limitation and nobody can tell you anything to the contrary for rent increases. Obviously, if your property is subject to a local rent control like Los Angeles, for example, you're not entitled to any rent increase at all. Now, everything I'm talking about deals with the Tenant Relief Act and how it's now morphed now that we're in the post-moratorium period. But I just want to caution you, everything I'm saying has nothing to do with the city of Los Angeles. Nothing to do with the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles has their own state of emergency that was written by your wonderful mayor, Eric Garcetti. And in that situation, he has an open-ended moratorium, which means that we can't serve a 3-day notice, a 15-day notice. We can't serve a 30-day notice. I don't care whether it's a single-family home or not. We cannot terminate a tenancy or bring forth an eviction that's based on non-payment of rent. If I have a property in the city of Los Angeles and somebody brought in extra people or a dog or potentially a small, very small methamphetamine lab, then in that was funny, you're supposed to laugh right there. Then we can proceed forward with an eviction in the city of Los Angeles. But for non-payment of rent, that's verboten, and rent increases for properties subject to the Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance, RSO, rent increases are prohibited for 1 year until our wonderful mayor declares that the emergency is over. So don't get confused by what I say if the property is located in Los Angeles, it's a whole different story. If you're representing a seller and is a tenant in possession of a beautiful single family home that is not subject to any rent control whatsoever, and you need to get that tenant out and you're in the city of Los Angeles, what you can do is nothing. That guy can sit there and there's nothing you can do about it until the mayor declares that the state of emergency is over. So don't get confused with the city of Los Angeles. So I think that basically in a pretty short fashion and hopefully a simple fashion covers where we are right now with the end of the moratorium on which occurred on October 1st. I did do a video presentation for the Apartment Owners Association. So if you go to their YouTube channel, which is AOA USA, and you want to hear me pontificate on the same topic where you can kind of pause it, then feel free to go to AOA USA, the YouTube channel, and you'll see my wonderful face and just click on the face and you'll get to hear about another hour of me. And also there's a big questions and answer period in that one. Simon, I think we're gonna open it up to questions right now. And so if somebody can read me some questions, I'll be happy to respond to it. If there are any questions. Simon, your mic's off.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I have a property in Silmar that I want to list, but the seller is concerned with the tenant, which is month to month, never late. She's afraid that he's going to do something because of all these laws. So I perfectly understand your presentation. Thank you for that. So in this case, if I want to list the house, what will be the notice and I will give to the seller, to the tenant?
Okay, well, first of all, Sylmar is part of the city of Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and you cannot terminate a tenant on a no-fault basis. This would be considered no fault, that he hasn't done anything wrong. The owner wants to sell the property. So just as I was saying, you can do nothing. You can sell the property, but you're going to have to sell it with this tenant in possession until such time as the mayor of Los Angeles ends the state of emergency. Once he ends the state of emergency, then you can serve your 60-day notice. Please leave my property. It's totally permissible. But whether the owner of the property wants to move in, or he's got a kid coming back from college and they need to move in, or a special needs child, the mayor of the city of Los Angeles doesn't care about your needs because you are an owner of income property. He only cares about the tenant's needs. So you can do nothing in that situation.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, Dennis, Ron Riggs here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
And been not too long since we spoke, and we finally got a few transactions done here. I've got a situation in Hermosa Beach right now where when COVID hit and lady stopped paying a little bit, and now she's backed up. If in the repayment, is it 50% repayment? That's the question. And then the second one is that you said, because I was going to try to get rid of her now that this is all gone. You know, she's claiming that I'm, what would be the word? Because
Harassing?
yes. I'm
Harassing because you had the audacity to ask for your rent, Ron?
Yeah.
How could you? Oh my God, I think they should flog you. You know?
Moved in a second dog. Now, by the way, I've known Dennis for over 20 years and has done a lot of evictions, and you're pretty backed up right now, but we just got 2 done, and I think 1 took a year. And so my question is, so that I do this the right way, and that she's moved a dog in, and before we had a situation, maybe this is a learning experience for some people here. We didn't know whether to go that she had moved the dog in or was rent, and you know, which way would people go if they've broken the contract, or you know, how do we go here? And don't forget the question of how much I can collect back.
All right, so you're dealing now, we're in a special situation because the moratorium in most situations is considered over. So if I had a tenant who hasn't paid me a bunch of rent, including October, I would do 2 things. I'd serve a 3-day notice to get rid of the dog. I would at the same time serve a 3-day notice for the October's rent only. I would then immediately, and you should do this today, Ron, apply for the rent relief program under housingiskey.com for all the rent that they owe you, including October. We serve 2 notices, one for the dog, one for the October rent only, and we basically can start the eviction right after those notices expire. And we have a clear path for an eviction in that situation.
By the way, the guy in Wilmington that you just got out for us 2 months ago owed me $37,000. And this one right here that we're speaking about owes me is in Hermosa Beach.
Right.
The one I'm getting nothing, no response back from rent relief.
Okay, so on that basis, wait till November 1st, and you can file a small claims court action against this person. It's not going to cost too much. If you need our assistance, contact us. I'll have something on my website by the end of this week dealing with helping landlords in terms of filing the small claims court, locating your tenant, setting it up for the date, and then advising clients, hey, this is what you need when you go into court. This is what you should be saying.
So anybody out there that's got this situation, FYI, I don't know if you still do it or not, Dennis, but do you still do collections and collect the money for us?
Yes, once there's a judgment, we do the collections, and we're heavy into collections at this firm.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dennis, I have a question. If a tenant has been paying at least 25% of their rent in 2020, how does that apply to them? Are they in 2022? Are they going to get evicted based on what's in the arrears, or can they still make that up, like with the rent, that month rent?
What city, please?
I'm in Los Angeles County, Sherman Oaks.
Okay, so you're in the city of Sherman Oaks. The tenant miraculously didn't have to pay the 25%. There was no obligation on his part to pay 25% because the city of Los Angeles has their own moronic rules. So you were lucky to get 25%. So the only thing that you can do at this point is when the mayor declares that the emergency is over, okay, the tenant will have 1 year to pay the deferred rent. Then you can serve a 3-day notice in 1 year, good luck, and then start an eviction case. That's on the city laws. The only other thing that you do, which I would certainly encourage you to do, is to, again, apply for the rent relief program where they're paying 100%.
Okay,
So
I got it. So the tenant basically has a year to make up their rent, basically.
1 year to make up the rent from when the mayor declares the emergency is over. And now we're just talking Los Angeles. Don't get confused for your jurisdiction.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So by the way, maybe this is sort of the learning experience here, and I'm sure there's some.
Somebody
Yes,
else. I have a question. Hello, Dennis, thank you so much. I have a client, I do property management, and I have a client that just told me that she lost her job. She applied for the rent assistance and she doesn't qualify because she makes too much money. So what can I do in that situation?
Okay, what city is the property located?
Inglewood.
Inglewood. So what we can do right now today is serve her with a 3-day notice for the October's rent. The landlord also has to apply for all the rent that's owed, including October. And once they do that application, we serve the 3-day notice. We can do that concurrently, and then we start the eviction.
All right, thank you.
sorry about that. I didn't know what happened there. I've been doing this a while. One scared when she told me I was harassing her. So I actually called the Hermosa Beach Police Department, and the problem that I had was, one was the furnace wasn't working. It was during the winter, and she wouldn't allow me in there because of COVID and everything. But then she wanted to sue me and stop rent because of this. I mean, how far can these people go on us for harassment? And I mean, really, it worried me that I stopped communicating with her.
I think communication should be done, but do it in writing so that there's no misunderstanding as to what was said or what wasn't said, and people can't make things up. I would have followed that up with a letter to the tenant saying, hey, you're telling me that you have a heater problem. I'm trying to go in. You won't let me. Please let me know when I can go in. I'd send them a letter to that effect. The tenants are just trying to, set people up, which is what we see all the time here. And I don't know, landlords really shouldn't be afraid of the word harassment. It's just what the tenants bark out, and really nothing comes of it. It's not really something that someone can bring forth a lawsuit. I mean, obviously, if you're spray painting their car or, putting grease in front of their door or something so that they'll trip, that could be considered harassment, or maybe banging on their walls. But other than that, it's all garbage what they're talking about, and I wouldn't be concerned.
Hey, Dennis. First off, thank you very much. Some great information. Really appreciate your time here. For my landlord, we actually did apply for the tenant, and we got approved, and the landlord got 100% of the past due rents.
Mhm.
And we're doing it for another tenant now in the building. My question is, they have to make 80% of the median income of that city, correct? To apply 80% or less. Do you know, is that true?
I don't know. I don't know what the requirements are. I know that was the requirement in the previous rent relief program, but as of October 1st, I don't know whether they've changed it, but a lot of people are getting, a lot of people also aren't getting it. So,
Yeah.
again, then the tenant is responsible. But again, we have the power to solve this problem now. We have the power to evict right now.
Yeah, it's also about getting the landlord's money, though, they can get it. You know what I mean? Instead of just
And if
evicting
you
and
don't
getting rid
get
of
it from the state, you have one other option, and that's to sue them in small claims court would be my recommendation come November 1. Now, of course, the politicians, when they created this 19-month waiver of rent, they didn't say it was a waiver of rent. They said it's just deferred. You're going to get your rent. Well, if you don't get your rent from the state, the chances of getting your rent are probably about 15%. So they've created billions of dollars of losses for California landlords. And there are some class action lawsuits that are being filed for landlords who have literally been taken as a result of this governmental intrusion. And as I said in the last time I was at your location, it's no one is going to argue that certain tenants and the whole world was both, physically, mentally, and financially impacted by the pandemic. No one is going to argue that. But where my argument always comes is that in what society does one segment of society have to take on the financial burdens of the pandemic? No other industry is forced to take on other persons' financial burdens, except for the income property owners. So this truly has been a taking in violation of our Constitution, and there are some lawsuits that are proceeding, and maybe it's going to make its way to the Supreme Court where we'll have a chance.
My other question is this too. So when you said City of Los Angeles, you mean Hollywood, West LA, everywhere. You cannot evict anybody. And
those are just areas in the City of Los Angeles. For example, as you were saying, like Van Nuys and Studio City and Sherman Oaks and Woodland Hills and San Pedro, Hollywood, those are just areas in the City of Los Angeles. If you're a separate city like West Hollywood, Santa Monica, Glendale, Burbank, those are all separate cities, or where your company is housed, those are separate cities.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Christopher. Champagne? You're gonna have to speak up too.
I think I can, say it across the room. In terms of Hawthorne, I have income property in Hawthorne. So what I'm hearing, if I heard this correctly, I could go up 20%, 10% on the rents because it's the city of Hawthorne and it's its own city. It's not like the city of Los Angeles, correct?
Are you talking about a rent increase?
Yes.
Okay, so the issue is if it's a single family home, then you can, or a condo or a townhouse or a newer building, you can go up whatever you like to market level. If you go above 10%, you need to serve a 60-day notice. But if you have a building in Hawthorne, you're subject to rent control if it's more than 15 years old. It's got multiple units. So you're subject to statewide rent control. Remember, name a city in the state of California, and that city's under rent control. So there are no free cities because there's statewide rent control unless you fit one of the exceptions. So again, for your building in Hawthorne, if it's a multiple unit building where it's over 15 years, you're entitled to a rent increase right now today, a 30-day notice to raise the rent to 8.6%, every tenant in the building.
Now, does that change if you live in the units?
If you live in the unit?
Duplex, and you live in one unit and the other.
Okay, so we're switching it. If you live in a duplex and you lived there before the tenant joined that property, then that is an exception to statewide rent control, and you can raise the rent as much as you like.
Thank you.
Hey, Dennis,
I have one more-
We have a question from Debbie. Hold on, Ron. Debbie?
Hi, I've got a question. Property in Wilmington. The owner wants to sell the property. It's 2 houses on a lot. One of them's vacant, but she has a tenant in one of the properties. been there for about 30 years, wants to sell it. She wants to know how to get rid of her, or can she?
Very simple. You can't. Wilmington is part of the city of Los Angeles. That's just another area. 2 houses on 1 lot means that it's subject to the rent stabilization ordinance, assuming those properties were built prior to October 1978. If it's prior to, then it's subject to. So you can't ask a tenant to move because you want to sell the property. That's just, that's not. In that situation, you might want to walk over to the tenant and say the following: hey, I got $20,000 if you want to leave. And if you do want to take the money, I'll do a Dennis Block voluntary vacate agreement and sign it, and then I'll give you the money and you have to move. So you can do basically a kind of a cash for keys situation.
So what happens, she sells the property with a tenant in the property in one of the units? How about the new owner?
The new owner, assuming they want to move in, they'll have to pay relocation money, which is anywhere from $10,000 to $22,000, depending on how long the tenant's been there, whether he has children or handicapped or over the age of 62. But
they've been there.
You can't do anything until the mayor declares that the emergency is over.
Okay, and they've been there for 30 years in their 80s.
Then that is exempt from an owner moving in. So that
Very
you
good.
can't do,
Okay.
even if the mayor ends the moratorium. One of the family member move-in exceptions is if the tenant has been there longer than 10 years and is over the age of 62, you have no way of getting them out. With one small exception, you can always do what they call an Ellis Act. If you're going to permanently remove that unit from rental housing use, so let's pretend you sold it to an investor who wants to bulldoze the place and put up 6 condominiums, for example, then you can get rid of the 82-year-old person.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'm going to take one more, and then I'm going to have to call it a day, my friends.
Dennis, one question. Since the moratorium
I
has
have one question too.
impacted the landlords, moratorium has impacted the landlords, do we foresee in the future the landlords asking tenants for more of a deposit on the, before they move in, like maybe 6 months to like 9 months? Is that something that might happen or could happen, just so they have reassurance to get their money?
It cannot happen because the most you can get on a security deposit is 2 months rent. So if you're renting the unit out for $2,000, you could get the first month's rent, $2,000, and a $4,000 security. That would be the most. The only other exception would be, while you can get up to 2 months rent security, you can ask for advance rent payments, but it has to be 6 months to 1 year. It can't be less. It's crazy law. So if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to give you a 6-month lease, I want all the rent up front plus my 2 month security, that you could do, but you can't take a 3-month or a 4-month security.
Okay. All right, just looking at the way how you can.
I got one more, and I think, yes, go ahead.
All right, Dennis, in regards to a transaction you're involved in, and there's a seller in possession, now the seller doesn't want to vacate after 30 days of the seller in possession. What rights does the seller, what rights does the buyer have when someone after close of escrow is still occupying the property?
In that case, we can immediately proceed. It's a 3-day notice to quit based on, we call it a sale eviction, that you sell the property, you get the money, you sign the deed, and then incredulously you don't move. So we do those cases all the time as well. There was a case where I made Inside Edition. This was about 3 months ago. It wasn't my case, but a couple bought a house in Riverside for $615,000, and they were trying for 1 year to get the previous owner out. They were stopped by the moratorium, which prevented all evictions in the beginning of 2020. So they were prevented. I heard that they finally just got the seller off the property, but that's a case we can start right now. If you do, and I don't recommend allowing the seller to remain in possession, but if you do not have the seller sign a rental agreement. We don't want to make him a tenant at all. So he's never considered a tenant, because then they have tenants' rights. So make it where, let's pretend that the money is lessened in escrow, and that the seller to vacate on a certain date in the future. And don't even consider it rent. Don't mention rent, because if you mention rent, then it's like a landlord-tenant relationship. So just adjust the purchase price of the house or some sort of a credit to the purchaser, but do not use the words rent, landlord, rental agreement, or anything like that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me. I'll leave you with one quick story, and then I really got to get to my phones. And the quick story deals with a very philanthropic landlord who was walking on the beach. And as he's walking on the beach, he spots a bottle buried in the sand, and he picks it up, opens it up, and out comes a genie who was stuck in this bottle for 1,000 years. The genie is so thankful. She says, I'm going to grant you one wish and one wish only. Well, being a philanthropic landlord, he says, okay, I wish for world peace. The genie looks at him and says, there's about 6 billion people in the world, and that's somewhat kind of a tall order. Maybe you could give me something else, anything. So he goes, okay, I wish for a cure for cancer. The genie looks at him and says, the human body is so intricate that I really think this is above my skill level. I really don't think, give me one more, I promise you I'll do it. He goes, okay, I'm a landlord. I want you to do away with rent control. The genie looks at him and says, let's go back to that world peace one. Okay, kids, you take care.
Thanks, Dennis.
Bye-bye.
Well, I hope that information was informative. You can always reach out. The website, we're going to provide you with the website. I believe it's 123evictions.com. If you have any additional information. So thank you. Evict 123. Thank you. All right. I know we're cutting it close, so I wanted to bring Mindy with my NHD. She has some updates as well. So let's give her a round of applause.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you live, like out of the screen in a box.
Halle Berry.
No, I think it's set up that way. Okay. Yeah. There's still people on the call.
Okay. I handed out some new note cards. If anybody didn't get it, they're on the table over there. So what I'm going to go over today is Assembly Bill 38. I know you've heard me speak many times at your office meeting since January that this went into effect January 1st of this year. If you are representing the listing, it is your fiduciary duty to get the NHD report at that time. Stop waiting till you go to escrow. And here's why. How do you know if you're in a high fire, very high fire, or very high fire? Do I have to stand here?
No, you don't have to. I was just.
Or a very high fire severity zone. The only way you will know is by having a natural hazard disclosure report. My NHD uses state maps, county maps, city maps. And I know I've said this for like 16 years that I've been doing this, but now there's a heightened awareness because people are scared if they're in high fire zones and they can't get fire insurance. It's that simple. So I have a fabulous PowerPoint that I'd like to show. And Natalie, if you could pull it up for me, that would be awesome. This is the latest PowerPoint. We keep revising it like every month. We've worked very closely with CAL FIRE, the Fire Chief Stephen Hawks, and it's to help not only revise the forms for CAR, but also to be more in compliant as an NHD company. Don't forget, this is the only part of real estate that is still not regulated and mandatory. Civil Code 1103.7 went into effect in 1994. So the signature page has never changed. So let's look at the first map, which is the high fire. Can you guys see that? Or I don't know if you can make it any, oh, there we go. So notice the light pink versus the dark pink. One's very high fire is the darker pink and the lighter pink. So that's our whole state. This is the new assembly bill that went into effect January 1st, and it was revised July 1st because CAR changed the form to the defensible space section, which has that 3B with the 6 questions that the seller fills out. I'm getting calls from listing agents flipping out that the seller doesn't know how to fill it out. If they can't fill it out, then they don't. If they don't know what they did to their property, changing out tempered windows, changing flashings and broken pieces on the roof, did they clear their brush far enough away? They're gonna know that. And if they've been in a fire zone, they're gonna know they've been in a fire zone for the last year because the fire department or CAL FIRE requires very high fire severity zone to be cleared from all the brush. So now let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Assembly Bill 38 went into effect, changed it. What does this mean? You need to know if you're in the local level. Not all NHD companies are doing local maps and county maps. And the way we know that is Simon might call me as the buyer's agent and say, my buyer can't get any fire insurance from 10 different carriers, but the NHD said they're not in a fire zone. We know they didn't use local or county maps. Let's go to the next page. And this is for homes that are older than 2010, if it's in a high fire or very high fire zone. Okay, that's the law.
Speak up a little louder so Natalie will
Okay,
hear you.
Natalie, next slide, please. Oh,
Up there. Yeah.
Natalie, next slide, please.
Sorry, technology.
It's okay. This is my first presentation. Oh, I've done a couple live, so you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this is the best slide, or one of them. Check out if you're in a state level, or in your local level, or you're in a county level. Don't you think you need to have all 3 of these maps? Because if you don't, what if you're in one of these zones and it doesn't come up? Okay, next slide, please. I love it now that I know. Actually, this one is my favorite map. Look, I'm an artist. Look at the state and look at the county local level. I mean, it's huge difference. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you for helping, Natalie.
Like fire zone, is that what that is?
That's all fire. We're only talking fire, not
Are
flood.
those residential area or just?
This is the whole state that we're showing you, okay? And when you get your report and you're in the zone, you'll know because you're gonna get this. So my NHD for the last month or maybe month and a half has added this fabulous blue link, because we have blue links all over our report that the buyer needs to click on. It's so they can gather all the information on what's going on their property. This is so they can request a defensible space inspection from CAL FIRE if they're in the high fire severity zone. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. I mean, we're helping you help them, you know? Next slide, please. And this is whether you're on the state or local level. If you're in very high fire severity zone, you can't change anything. I've had people ask me to change it, which is nuts. It's called fraud. This is the signature page from 1994. Nothing has ever changed. So Michelle, I'm sure you know, you've been doing this a long time. You know this one
Why
page.
does everyone say that?
Why? Because you make the announcement of your beautiful career to everybody. That's why. You're like at the top that people look at. So I pick on you for that reason. I want to share with you that we've added right above the signature page where the buyer signs it. I, the buyer, have read and understood everything in this report, which is a joke because they don't read it and they sign it and then they're pissed off later that it's your fault. So, well, I'm just being honest. So look where we added AB 38 advisory and information. Why? Because we want to cover ourselves and we got permission from CAR. We add that because it's a big deal. Okay. So it's not just, did you get the report and understand it and all the legal documents, the environmental 1915 Bond Act, Mello-Roos. AB 38 is now in there because it's a new law. Next page, please. So CR has never changed the signature page since '94, by the way. My NHD does a summary sheet, and the reason this is so important is this is where you're going to see high fire, very high fire, and very high fire severity zone. If they're in AB 38, we write it, we put it in red, we write very high, we give you the page that it reflects. Oh my God, it's in like 4 places. Read. Next, I'm serious. The questions that I get when people call me, the first thing I say is, did you read it? Oh, no. it's like, I don't even want to talk to you. You're like, read it and understand it, and then ask me questions. So now we do the explanation. What does it mean if you're in a very high fire zone? So we give all the explanations. And again, very high is in red to help point it out. Next page, please. So this is what went into effect in January 1st, 1 to 4 units built before 2010. Next page, please. This is the AB 38 on your fire hardening defensible space form from CAR. This is under 3B. So these are the 6 items that the homeowner needs to basically check off if they did it. If they didn't, or they don't know, you don't fill it out for them, it's up to them. It's that simple. And people are flipping out, can you close escrow? Yes, because now there's another form from CAR that the seller gives the buyer in escrow, that when you go to close, the buyer has a year from the day they close escrow to be in compliance with AB 38. So a whole year. So nobody needs to flip out about closing because that's now been resolved. Next slide, please. So that's what went into effect. The person who owns or leases or operates a home must have the defensible space, be in compliance. And the new permits, by the way, if anybody's in a high fire severity zone, the state is not letting anybody pull permits. So what does that mean? You can't build, most likely. So this is why the report is so important. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I already said all that. This is your fire hardening defensible space form from CAR. Here's 3B, the 6 items I just went over. You should be familiar with this. Next slide, please. I have people calling me that don't even know the law went into an effect, by the way, in January, and we're in October. I know you work with those people. Help them. That's all I can say, help them. Here's where you sign the form, and the seller and the buyer. Next page. Here's basically keeping your property green and clean and lean of anything near the house. The dispensable space is basically coupled with all of these type of things for wildfire. Next page. And this is what it means. If you're in zone 1 or 2, do you need to clear it 100 feet? What do you need to clear? How do you know? Are you on an angle? Do you have any kind of depths and things that might be storing stuff under the house? These are things that people need to have heightened awareness. Next space, please. I love this map because check it out. Zone 1, zone 2. How close are you to the house? 30 feet, 100 feet, 10 feet? How do you know what needs to be cleared? This is where CAL FIRE or your local fire department comes to the home to tell you what to do. You do it to be in compliant, and then you get your certificate, which I'll show you. Next one, please. Same thing, zone 1, what you have to do. And this is all for the homeowner. Next slide, please. And I'm gonna resend you that, or you have it. You can send this to everybody.
Perfect.
The whole, your whole.
Yeah.
Zone 2, 30 feet to 100 feet. What do you need to do basically so you can help your homeowner? But this isn't your expertise, right? So just remember that. Next slide, please. The local ordinances means that the government agencies that are local will always supersede state and county because they've been updated more frequently. And this really scared me. The last fire map that was updated in LA was 2008. Just saying. Next, people don't get it. Like they think they have a fire in Northern California that's going to show up on the map like next week, next month, next year, and it doesn't happen that way. Minimum vertical clearance, depending on how much you have on your home, determines what you have to clear and away from your house. Next slide, please. Same thing with the horizontal clearance. This is even more important. People forget about slopes and what does it mean and how does it affect the property? So this is just another example that you can look at later in detail when you get this presentation. And it's just so helpful to understand it even better. Next slide, please. So basically it's just saying the landscaping you choose needs to be, non-fire or fire retardant, right? Some people don't think about the plants they put right next to the house that could go up and smoke twice as fast. So that's what this means. Next slide. And then this is what we just looked at to request the inspection. Next slide. And that's why every report that's flagged, shall we say, AB 38 is going to have that in it, so that you don't have to worry about looking it up. And then this is the certificate that CAL FIRE will give to the homeowner once they've come in and they look at what did you do in zone 1, 2, defensible space to reduce the fuel zone or other requirements for that particular home. And then they give them, like this says, continual annual cleanup throughout the fire season and around all the structures on the property. So they're telling the homeowner what they need to do. And by the way, if they tell the homeowner what to do and they don't do it, they fine you because they're going to come and do it for you. They're not waiting for the homeowner to get out their butt to like make sure everything's safe. So I think that's the last one. Is that the last one, Natalie? Yeah, pretty much. We're giving you $10 million of E&O insurance. Everyone in the transaction is protected. Bless you. You sneeze to the truth. We protect the buyer, the seller, the listing, buyer, seller, listing agent, buyer's agent, TC if you use one, and escrow. And the best part using my NHD is we've never had any issues with our report ever since 1994. And that's why I am here to represent them. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So you're selling a property that is in a high fire situation, and they had a fire recently and they don't have insurance, they cannot insure that property. Is it a statewide insurance that they will get, or what
I
happens?
can't answer that. I don't sell insurance.
Okay. All right.
I'm so sorry. But you know what I can do? We are now in partnership with an insurance company that's been around for like 20 years. And we're working with them because they've been able to get insurance in California when other carriers couldn't do it. Because people have been pulling out of the state. Like, let's say you have insurance now on your property and I want to buy it. The insurance company will say, we're not renewing it.
We're seeing a lot in Orange County, especially in the hills areas like,
Yeah.
I don't know what city that area is, but they're not insuring homes.
They're not insuring homes and people are getting upset because there wasn't a fire. There's no problem with that area. But if it's high fire severity zone, they're saying, no, we don't want to be even touching this. So it's serious.
Northridge is considered high fire.
Yeah.
Porter Ranch.
Yeah, there's a lot. Like, I hate it when people say to me, oh, I'm just over here. There's no problem. We don't have fire. We don't have flood. We don't have this. We don't have that. I'm like, you know what? Get the NHD before you open your mouth. Don't say that. Because you might end up having a problem later where it shows up and then it like aggravates you. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, guys, I know, thank you so much, really informative information. So we're gonna cut loose in a few minutes. I just got 2 more announcements that I would like to share. Nat, if you can just provide me with the slide real quick. One, this Friday. The new residential purchase program. Yes. Now, I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna be 3 hours of a dry material, okay?
What was
But
doing the class?
I will be posting and teaching the course. So I already got trained on it. I already have the copy of the RPA. There's a lot of new information on there, folks. So I encourage you to please be here. It'll be this Friday, 12 to 3. Lunch will be provided, and we will also give you copies of it. This new RPA launch, I believe, December of this year, 2021. Okay, this Friday. Pardon me?
Do we have to RSVP or not?
No, just show up here in the training room. It'll also be recorded, but I encourage you to be in class. I think it's more personable if we do it in here, and then we can definitely ask a lot of questions. Again, this is in full effect December of this year. Lots of new stuff added to the RPA. Okay, and then last but not least, Nat, next slide, please. Our grand opening. Yes. Just around the corner, October 15th, folks, here at the Keller Williams. All of the affiliates are all welcome. We're also going to be doing a red ribbon cutting a couple days prior with, I believe, with the government officials, but that's going to be just ALC leadership. But the grand opening will be Friday, October 15th at 6 o'clock here. guess what? We're gonna have food, wine, beer, and the festivities like we always know that we have here at Keller Williams, but more so the network opportunity. So love to see each and every one of you. Everyone is welcome, family, friends, invite everyone. We want to see this office full house with a lot of people, okay? And that's, I think that concludes our sales meeting. All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, yeah. Very good. Thanks, guys.
I'm not heard him speak.
No, oh, he's located out in the valley somewhere. No.